These eyes are crying. Well, these eyes have seen a lot of love, but they're never gonna see another one like I had with you. Good thing I'm a good tattooer.
Hey, I'm Tracy, the E-Lightened artist, not the singer. And yeah, man, the original H6 is still my favorite e-bike. I ran into a little bit of a hiccup though. I had the headlight cable zip tied a little bit too tight to the harness, and one of the boys was riding the bike and they hyperextended the handlebars, snapping that cable, and the power cable from the headlight grounded to the frame. I didn't even realize anything was wrong with it until I went to go shut off the headlights and they wouldn't go off. So I'm assuming that the MOSFET in the controller had blown, and there was no real damage to the controller per se or the function of the bike. You just couldn't turn off the headlights. So in order to confirm that, I pulled the controller out of the H6, stuck it in the X3 Pro. They're the same, and same result. Lights came on when the bike came on and you could not turn them off. That's just a minor inconvenience, but still, you know, there was obviously something wrong with the controller. So I let Wallke know, and they sent me a new one out. But while that one was on the way, I figured I would try to do a palm grip swap on the H6 Max. That didn't work out. I ordered new grips from Amazon, and I was going to do this cool video about how to mod those grips. But unfortunately, you'd have to cut the tube on the throttle, do your best to remove that insert at the end of the bars. It's in there pretty good. And it just seemed like more hassle than it was worth, man. I mean, these grips are fine. I just thought it'd be kind of trick, and I thought I'd make a cool video, but fail. And of course, the weather here has been crap. We got like 12 inches of snow. So I thought I'd do a video on installing ice studs in one of these bikes. But unfortunately, those CST tires on the H6 Max, they have these little slits in the cleats, and they're just not really conducive for the style of studs I have. You'd have to use longer ones. So I stuck the studs on my X3 Pro, which makes sense. This bike was built for that sort of thing. But my arthritis in my knees was acting up, and riding in 12 inches of snow was just not in the cards. So I went and got some shots instead. So in this video, we're going to be focused on the H6. You would think that you could get into that controller and replace that MOSFET like you can with other controllers. But in order to make them waterproof and tamper resistant, it's filled with epoxy. And these controllers are made for Wallke and these bikes and these harnesses. So you're not going to have good luck swapping out to an aftermarket. So since I had the controller pulled out of the bike, I figured I would pull out the entire harness and make a video showing you guys how to put that all back together and basically the inner workings and guts of these bikes. And while I was at it, I figured I would do something I'd been planning on for a while. You notice there's no shifter on here. I turned this bike into a single speed and got it all on video. So let's get into it. So why would I want to turn this bike into a single speed? Mainly the shifter, the triggers would poke me in the fingers when I rode, and I always kept it in high gear. I never even shifted the bike. I would just throttle off the line, and once I got going, start pedaling. And also I upgraded my chain ring to a 60 tooth, and I upgraded the cassette to an 11 tooth. So that's really high geared without any kind of chain cover on the chain ring. So that derailleur would give me some slop when I'd hit some bumps, and every now and then my chain would come off. So I figured getting rid of the derailleur and the shifter would just make it a much tighter ride. So first I pull off the derailleur guard and remove the chain because it's going to need some shortening. Then off with the derailleur. Then I pull out the shifter wire and lose the trigger shifter. To create a little balance in the cockpit, I decided to move the throttle to the right side, which of course means you have to move everything. So once I got everything in the handlebars, positioned how I wanted them, it was time to plug it all in and get this bike back to functionality. So here's the wire harness out of the bike. In the bike it looks kind of complicated, but it's really just 5 inputs. 2 for the brakes, 1 for the display, 1 for the throttle, then 1 that goes low down into the headlight, and they all converge to meet up at the controller. All the inputs are color coded, so it's pretty hard to mess this up. There's a little bit of extra slack on the display cable because I've got it off to the left, so I wrapped it up with a little bit of self-adhesive rubber. Then I like to wrap it all up with cable schlock to keep it tidy. It's basically neoprene with Velcro. Then we crack it open and get into the guts. I have my dual battery EQ and the old controller tucked away in there. Now here's a tip. This EQ comes with this fuse holder that I'm not a huge fan of. All the connections and components are waterproofed except this. And as you know, I like to ride around the water. So I like to swap out the stock fuse holder with these jacketed jobs using a 30 amp fuse instead of the 40 amp it comes with. You just get in there and pry open the old fuse holder and snip off the spade terminals. This might make some snobs cringe, but I like to use butt connectors and heat shrink. I also decided to neuter this connector off the controller. Now this is an auxiliary pigtail to supply power to, I guess, like a USB port or something, but this bike has one built into the switch. So this pigtail is redundant and a short waiting to happen. So off it goes. I use a little bit of heat shrink to insulate the cables out of harm's way. I still leave them a little bit long in case I decide to use them later. The other connectors on the controller are for the motor harness, power from the EQ, pigtail to the brake light, and there's a cable for the cadence sensor, which happened to be the first cable I fished through the frame. Connect the blue to blue for the pedal assist. Then we get our motor cable laced through. We'll connect that later. Then our harness from the handlebars run through the top hole in the tube and connects to the controller. Running the pigtail from the brake light up the tube can be a little tricky. I just cram it in there and fish it out with a hooked pick and plug her in. Now I'm running the power cable from the rear battery, which plugs into the equalizer. And the fuse connector from the EQ goes to the controller. Now comes the trickiest part of the whole process. Cramming all this stuff into this little space without kinking the wires. It can be done, but it might test you. And it's like bizarro Tetris. Then plug the tube battery connector plate to the EQ and lock it down. It's like trying to put a lid on a jar of crackhead earthworms, but it'll work. Those terminals were a little cruddy, so I blasted them with some electromotive. There's some tie-off points for the harness under the tube, so I get those cables tied up kind of loose till I'm ready to batten everything down. Then give all the slack cableage a tuck and tidy. Time to toss in a battery and check our work. Yeah, it fires up, but we got an error code because the motor's not plugged in yet. So let's get that motor connected and tidy up the cable. And remember, there's a tie-off point under the frame here. And now we're good, error-free. So here's another thing I've been meaning to address. Last year I smashed up the rear lock cover doing jumps and acting like a fool. So I just deleted the lock altogether and strapped the battery down. Of course, Wallke got wind of that and sent me a new one, so we'll put it on. We stick the cable in the cover and screw the lock cylinders to the backing plate. Then that assembly all goes together with a tab and 2 screws. Then the whole thing's attached to the battery rail with 4 M4.07 screws. I noticed the rail was a little loose. This thing has taken so much abuse. There's 2 screws on there, so if your rail needs adjustment, that's how you do it. Battery slides in nice and easy, locks into place. Lock cylinder is nice and smooth, just like new, because it is. Quick test of the tail running and brake lights, all good. So this is the headlight cable that snapped and shorted and started this whole odyssey. I'm swapping it out with this dual beam job I got a while back. Made a video about it last year. It is rough, but check it out. Straighten out the light, batten it down, and pow. Got a loud horn too. Now let's get back to wrestling with this drivetrain. So this is my only 62 chainring, so it floats from bike to bike. I actually pop it off and stick it on another bike I feel like riding. The gearing on this H6 is nuts though. There is no ghost pedaling. I made a video about that here if you want to check that out. Since I ditched the derailleur, we got to shorten the chain about 8 links or so. Put on a master link and it's still a little sloppy. So I pulled the wheel back a touch and adjusted the brakes to make sure the wheel was spinning free. Followed by a full speed brake test. Oh, and you notice that I put the pedals on. These are the Wallke branded pedals. They actually sent me several sets of these for our Christmas giveaway, but I have one set left. So first person in the comments, let me know what Wallke e-bike you ride, and if you'd like a set of these, let me know and I'll send them out to you. Okay, so back to the single speed wrestling match. I actually hated the way the chain was acting coming off that 11-tooth gear. The swing arm is just too beefy to allow such a tight rotation. So I flipped the bike over to get a better look, and I hoped that if I got the motor cable out of the way, maybe it would help. But it was just wonky, and it kept wanting to jump from 8th to 7th gear. So I put the derailleur back on and added a few links to the chain. And this allowed me to put the motor cable back under the swing arm where it belonged. So now the derailleur functions purely as a chain tensioner. I've got it fully extended and tuned all the way out. And by Jove, it worked. I love it. This bike is now a fixed gear beast. No more shifter triggers poking my fingers. No worries about the chain flopping off or smacking the derailleur on a curb. And of course it was crap weather that day, so my camera work wasn't that great and I didn't get to ride too much, but I've been riding it since and I totally dig it. I really love it. It rides like a balls out BMX, no ghost pedal whatsoever. This is exactly what I had imagined for this bike and I finally got there. So that's all I got for today. Do me a favor and slug that bug. My next bike review is going to be kind of different. Might be 3 wheels involved. And of course, special thanks to Wallke e-bikes, Tannus Armour, Cafferty Cyclery in downtown Nampa, and of course, Xnito helmets. Cheers guys, see you next time.
All that work I did on this bike, and I forgot to charge the batteries. 'Cause he's an airhead.